Well, there's a very long story, a story that begins when I was 12 years old in my hometown in Brazil. I was starting high school, and one of my teachers, the history teacher, gave us an assignment to write about the life of the Buddha. And so I did that assignment, and my mother was, she always helped us with our homeworks and assignments. And she also was very interested in researching on the life of the Buddha. And so this was my first contact, and it was something very special because I am from the northeast of Brazil. It's not the part of Brazil where there was Japanese immigration. That is in the south of Brazil, in São Paulo, Paraná, you see. So to my knowledge, there was no Buddhist influence there. But this teacher, you know, she gave us this assignment, and this was my very first contact with the Buddha, the historical figure, the spiritual teacher. And then much later, I started researching on several Eastern philosophies, and I started participating in a study group that met every Tuesday at a psychiatric hospital in Rio. And it was led by a very well-known Brazilian psychiatrist, Nise da Silveira, who had studied with Jung. She was a Jungian psychiatrist. A film was made about her recently. And she had started this art therapy section at this very big psychiatric hospital in Rio, which later became the Museum of Images of the Unconscious, which is recognized by UNESCO. And she invited some of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche's students to come. So they came, I talked to them, they gave me their publication, Ananda, so I started reading about that. And much, much later, when I had already become a diplomat in the 80s, I was in Africa, in Abidjan, and a book came out about the life of Alexandra David Mel, this French explorer who was the first woman to go to Tibet and who was a Buddhist herself. So I read the book, then I read her books about Tibetan Buddhism, and I was convinced that, wow, the philosophy that inspired this woman must be extraordinary. And I started reading and researching. Then some years later I went to New York, and when I arrived in New York I said, now I must find a teacher. You see, and I started researching and looking. I went to Tibet House. I started receiving Tibet Drum, their publication, and I read in Tibet Drum that there was this American who was the first American geshe, Michael Roach. And I started looking for the place where he gave the teachings, and I finally went to a lecture with two of the monks that belonged to his entourage. And I finally found where they were, the Asia Classics Institute. They had started a project called Asia Classics Input Project, which was to send some monks from Sermey in Bilakupe to St. Petersburg in Russia to transcribe the sacred texts that the Russians took from Mongolia to St. Petersburg. So I went to his teachings, and in 2 weeks' time, he was teaching at the time on the Abdharma Kosha, Vasubandhu's Abdharma Kosha. So that was my introduction, like that. And 2 weeks later, he took me to his teacher, who became my root lama, Sermey Geshe Losang Tachin, and he gave me refuge.
Okay.
and Bodhisattva vows. So that's how it started in earnest. But a long story
Okay.
over several continents. I feel very privileged. You can't do better than that. Being here, and being able to visit where the Buddha was born, and taking my whole family with me, my granddaughters who are 15, 11 and 7 years old, being exposed to all this. I think it's a great privilege. I don't think it's important to categorize Buddhism. I think that the Dharma is something to be lived, not believed, but lived. I'm reminded of the parable of someone who has been struck by an arrow. And the Buddha says, when somebody is struck by an arrow, you don't ask where it came from, what it's made of. You just get it out to stop suffering. So I think that the Dharma is this, it's something to be practiced, something to be lived. The only way to know whether it works is by applying it to your daily life, to your experience, to your relationship with others, your relationship with the world. I think it's a practice for all ages, really. Which age can forego compassion? Which age can forego wisdom? So Buddhism is as relevant as ever, and perhaps even more so because we're living in such troubled times. So we must constantly bring back to mind, compassion, and realize dependent arising. Because I think that I look at my country, for instance. We're undergoing a lot of strife in my country. And there's this need, to keep in mind, to always bring back to mind that all phenomena arise interdependently. And, compassion is really the way to go about living in this world. Compassion is very necessary. I was very intrigued by the life of Machi Glapdrum, and this practice that she introduced. And it's indeed a practice where compassion is highlighted because you're donating everything, even your own body. So truth is, I think it's a very important practice, and you should apply the spirit of truth to your whole existence. I think that the practice goes beyond ritual alone. You have to really keep in mind that you should apply this principle to your whole life. I think we must be mindful. As I said, I don't define Buddhism. I don't categorize it, you see. But I think it's important, what the Buddha said, for instance, in the Kalama Sutra, don't believe in things because your teachers have said. because an authority has imposed that. You have to believe, you have to look at the Dharma as the goldsmith treats the gold, you see, by weighing it, by testing its degree of purity. So this is the goal, you see. It's really to lead a path. My root teacher, well, as I said, within 2 weeks of starting my sort of theoretical training, my junior teacher took me to him in New Jersey, small town called Howell. He had come, he was a Sarmei Geshe, meaning he was from Sarmei Monastery. And he tells a very interesting story he told about himself. He said he was not a very keen student when he was small, but then a very high Lama in the Gelugpa lineage, Pabongka Rinpoche, came to visit the monastery, and he was assigned to be the attendant to Pabongka Rinpoche. And then Pabongka Rinpoche looked at him, put his hand on his head and said, this is a clever one. And he said that totally changed his attitude. And then he became a very earnest student. And he arrived at the highest level of philosophical training in his lineage, which is Alarampa Geshe. He was one of the very few to have still passed his examination in Tibet. And he was a very kind man, very great sense of humor, you see, great kindness, great kindness. This is what I remember most about him. For the first time in Howell, New Jersey, a very small temple, you see, called Trashigenpil Ling. And it had been established by Mongolian immigrants who came to this place in New Jersey during the Second World War. You see, when they fled Mongolia and established themselves there. There's more than one temple there, actually. But this one is a very, very small temple with this amazing teacher. So it's, as I was privileged to have been told to write about the life of the Buddha when I was 12 in the northeast of Brazil, my good luck continued when I met this amazing teacher in this very small, very humble small town in New Jersey, in this very small temple. It was very important, you know, because you may have, you know, theoretical introduction to Buddhism through texts, through books written. But when you meet your teacher, there's something else that comes into play, which is this empathy that you develop with your teacher. And because of the empathy, then the understanding comes. You see, the blessings of your teacher influence your, enable your understanding and enable your practice. You see, without a teacher, a person may become very educated, but this relationship, which is so important, this relationship, this empathy that you develop with your teacher, this is what really enables you to deepen your practice. In the case of my own case, my experience is that I absolutely needed a teacher. That was a point. I had practiced meditation, of course, before that. Actually, I had started practice meditation with a Theravada monk, a very nice monk too, Kurunegoda Pyatissa Mahatera. And he was, I think, at the time, he was the president of the Buddhist Association of New York. But I hadn't taken refuge. I was just, starting to, I was looking for a teacher, actually, you see. And I had practiced meditation, but that alone is not sufficient, at least not in my experience it wasn't, you see. I think that meditation must be complemented by a good Buddhist education. In my case, as I said, I found both complementary. But of course, without the practice, the scholarly knowledge is just that, just scholarly knowledge. You see, it's the practice that actualizes that knowledge into your own life, I'd say practice is what transforms scholastic knowledge into the path. Well, I try to apply it above all, by looking at the world as the Dhammapada Sutra says, a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom and a dream. And by being inspired by this experience of the world in this light, to apply compassion. And so compassion is a very big thing for me, I may not have a shred of renunciation, but I have very intense devotion, you see, to my teachers, to the teacher who the Buddha, the Tathagata was, and to the Dhamma as a path that I believe does lead to the end of suffering. Well, the West, there's an analyst, an academician, a Western academician, that has analyzed that the penetration of, that the West has had like 5, let's say, waves or 5 types of approaches to Buddhism. One, in very early times, it was indifference, then it was intolerance, then it was sort of academic curiosity towards the 19th century, in the context of a certain approach to Eastern Orientalism. And after that, really a penetration where people, Westerners, started going to teachers and starting to practice. But what I see as a great danger in the West is this approach that people have of practicing meditation without any real knowledge of the teachings, especially, the teachings in the other paramitas, practicing meditation in a decontextualized way, practicing meditation is just a means of calming yourself down or becoming, very composed or, as people say, very zen. This is very dangerous because meditation is not, you want to be, tranquil, calm, take a Xanax or a Prozac. Meditation is not a medicine against depression or anxiety. That's not what meditation is for. You see, and there's this tendency in the West of decontextualizing meditation and seeing it separately from the doctrine, from the teachings of the Buddhas and the practice of the other paramitas. But it's useful but as I said, the risk is decontextualizing it. You cannot decontextualize. You cannot practice meditation just become calm and, composed and fighting anxiety. That's not what meditation is meant to be at all. It's much more revolutionary than that. So you cannot decontextualize it, Even mindfulness. Of course mindfulness is very useful. It's useful in any context, in your daily life, in your work, you see. But you cannot practice just one thing without realizing it in the context of the whole practice, in the context of the Noble Eightfold Path, away from the context of correct view. You see, if you decontextualize, you take meditation out of the context of the whole practice, and I think you are doing the Dharma a great disfavor.